Okay, welcome to Drawing One. So this first lecture is one that I usually give in person in the first week of class in the classroom. We're going to do this one online instead, and it corresponds with the reading that I've linked. So if you go into Canvas and go into the first module and you see the prompt that says drawing on the right side of the brain. Click on that and you can read a little description about this unit. You can also read the descriptions of the exercises we're going to do in this unit, and you will find a link to the reading that is associated with this lecture. Basically, I draw material from a lot of different written sources rather than requiring a single textbook for this class. So I link to those PDFs in the modules, so you can access the reading there. You can also find these slides there so that you can go back over them in your own time. There's also a video that was produced by the woman who wrote the book that kind of animates the concept of drawing on the right and left sides of the brain. Okay. So when we think about different kinds of skills, and we think about different kinds of skills that you're learning in classes in school, drawing is a kind of whole skill. And what I mean by whole skill is that it requires some basic components, and once you've learned them and integrated them, you can apply them to learn to draw and to better your drawing ability. This is the book that I'm pulling some of this lecture material from and that your reading for the first module is from. It's called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, and it's by Betty Edwards. Okay, so basically the theory of drawing put forth in this book is that it's a relationship, there's a relationship between drawing and visual perception. So our brain processes the information that we take in through our eyes, and if we can understand that relationship and how it connects to our drawing abilities and how we translate our observations into drawing, into mark making, then we can get a better control on that process and improve our drawing skills if we can understand that perceptual relationship a little better. So the way we apply this theory is that we first look at the 5 basic component skills of drawing. So what are the 5 separate skills that we need to figure out to get to that whole, to get to that complete picture of what drawing is. And then the second thing is we need to figure out what kinds of conditions facilitate making cognitive shifts from R mode, or the right side of the brain, the thinking seeing mode specialized for drawing. So here are the 5 basic component skills of drawing. One is the perception of edges. This particularly relates to the basic element of art called line. If you had foundations or 2D design or one of the foundational type classes, you learned about the 5 basic elements of art. If you didn't, that is okay. We're going to go over them with some of our lessons in this class. I will also link my lecture online specifically. But basically, perception of edges relates to the basic element of art, line. 2, the perception of spaces. This one relates to another basic art element, which is shape. 3, the perception of relationships. We're going to talk about the relationships between objects a lot, particularly when we do our workshop on sighting, measuring, and mapping to complete drawing. 4, the perception of lights and shadows. What do we call lights and shadows when we're talking about art? We call that value. So we're also going to be talking about value, which is yet another one of the basic 5 elements of art. And the 5th and final of these basic components is perception of the whole. Another word for perception of the whole is gestalt. Okay, so here's just kind of a visual diagram of those 5 concepts and how they build on each other to create our holistic perceptual skills. Let's talk about the right brain and the left brain. The 2 halves are called the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. And some of this ideation about what side of your brain controls what side of your body, we're going to do some exercises to kind of stimulate different aspects of that relationship. Most scientists agree that for a majority of individuals, information processing based primarily on linear and sequential data is mainly located in the left hemisphere, while global perceptual data is mainly processed in the right hemisphere. So left dominant brains we tend to see because speech and language are such vitally important human capabilities. 19th century scientists named the left hemisphere the dominant, leading, or major hemisphere, and then the right brain the subordinate or minor hemisphere. Tests provide a surprising new evidence that each hemisphere, in a sense, perceives its own reality, or perhaps better stated, perceives reality in its own way. The verbal half of the brain, the left half, dominates most of the time in individuals with intact brains as well as in split brain patients. If you haven't seen any documentary work or read anything about split brain patients, it's fascinating. It's when the connecting tissue between the two sides of the brain is split and you have this this kind of lack of communication between the two sides. So it's super interesting. It's not that pertinent to what we're talking about, but it's something to maybe look into. Okay, so both hemispheres are involved in higher cognitive functioning, right? With each half of the brain, they specialize in a complementary fashion for different modes of thinking, and both are highly complex. There are differences, though. So as each of our hemispheres gathers the same sensory information, what we're perceiving, in our case mostly what we perceive visually because we're doing observation-based drawing, they'll handle that information in different ways. So the left hemisphere analyzes, abstracts, counts, marks time, plans step-by-step procedures, verbalizes, and makes rational statements based on logic, while the right hemisphere tends to be more intuitive, subjective, relational, and kind of time-free, okay? So our brain handles visual information in different ways too. In a manner of speaking, each of us has two minds, two consciousnesses, meditated and integrated by the connecting cable of nerve fibers between the hemispheres. What's important is that all of this incoming information can be handled in two fundamentally different ways, and that those two modes can totally work together, okay? So when we're talking about drawing ability, drawing expresses the ability to make a shift in brain state to a different mode of seeing and perceiving. Developing this way of seeing will improve your drawing, and that's one of our goals in this class. Creative individuals have recognized the differences between the two processes of gathering data and transforming those data creatively. L mode and R mode is what we call this. So basically they're used to avoid the location controversy about what's left brain and what's right brain. The terms are intended to differentiate the major modes of cognition regardless of where they are located in the individual brain. In order to cause this shift, we need to set up conditions that can cause you to make a mental shift to a different mode of information processing that enables you to see well and to see more completely with those 5 components of drawing that we talked about earlier. So, we're going to do a couple of drawing exercises. The basic assumption of the exercises is that the nature of the task can influence which mode will take up the job while inhibiting the other hemisphere. Which hemisphere gets the job done the quickest? Which hemisphere cares more or likes the task best? Which hemisphere cares least and likes the job the least? So for this part, you've already done exercise 1, which is your 30-minute self-portrait, right, in charcoal. For exercise 2 and 3, you need to refer to the reading in the module on Canvas, okay? So for exercise 2, you're going to go in the linked PDF of the reading material, you're going to go to pages 50 through 52, and for exercise 3, you'll go to pages 57 through 59. Okay, so for exercise 2, you'll look at this image and you'll see a series of instructions that walk you through different ways to interact with this image and to work with it. Okay, so you're going to be drawing left-handed and right-handed and doing some other extra kind of things to stimulate different parts of your brains while you do that. After you do this exercise, you might find that naming parts, there's one part where you name the parts of the face as you are drawing that face drawing. They might seem to confuse you a little bit. It might be better not to think of drawing it as a face. It might be easier to use the shape of the space between the two profiles as your guide. Basically, stating what you're drawing differently makes you think about it differently and makes the part of your brain that takes over light up differently, okay? So these are just exercises to try and stimulate the R mode of your brain, which tends to react to questions about things that are spatial, relational, and comparative. Okay, so the next exercise, for exercise 3, we're going to look at another set of stimuli, and we're going to draw something upside down. It's really important that you actually draw this upside down. Don't turn the image the other way and draw it right side up, because that would be not helpful to our purposes. So, in upright orientation, we can recognize familiar things, name them, and categorize them by matching what we see to our stored memories and concepts. So the way that I kind of break this down is based on something my drawing professor said to me when I was an undergrad. And his main advice that he said to us over and over again was, draw what you see, not what you know. So by drawing something upside down, we are confusing the part of our brain that recognizes things and thinks, I know what a nose looks like, I'll draw a nose, and then just draws without looking at proportion or looking at the lines or looking at what you're actually seeing. So what we want to do is trick our brain into drawing what we see and not just assuming it knows the shapes of things because it recognizes something about them, if that makes sense. So draw what you see, not what you know. This is what we're trying to train our brain to do in this exercise. So this is the image in your book that you're going to be drawing, and I would appreciate it if you would draw it upside down, like it is shown here. And you can see that when we turn it right side up, you tend to recognize elements more than when it's upside down. When it's upside down, our tendency is to just follow the lines and to mimic the lines and draw what we actually see. But when it's right side up, we start saying, oh, that's a face, those are glasses, those are hands, da 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 da. Okay, so those are your first exercises, and I will talk to you again soon.